Good morning, and for the record, I'm Jennifer Lewis. As a returning member of the previous vice chair, staff has requested me to be the acting chair until chair is elected at this meeting. Thus, I would like to make a few opening remarks regarding today's meeting of the Economic Forum. Oh, sorry. My enthusiasm was too much. We'll go ahead and do roll call, please. All right. Go with Ed Finger. Oh, sorry.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Crome?
Present.
Mr. Finger?
Here.
Mr. Gordon?
Present.
Acting Chair Lewis?
Present. All right, I'll go ahead and start again with some opening remarks. I am Jennifer Lewis, and I'd like to welcome back Mr. Crum and Mr. Gordon as returning members who were reappointed by Governor Lombardo earlier this month. I would also like to welcome Lindsay Anderson, who is up in Carson City for the meeting this morning, and Ed Finger, who is with us here this morning in Las Vegas. These are our two newest members of the forum. Ms. Anderson was appointed by Governor Lombardo earlier this month, while Mr. Finger was nominated to serve on the board by Assembly Speaker Steve Yeager. I'd like to personally thank everyone for being willing to serve on the forum and look forward to working with all of you over the next 2 years. Mr. Nakamoto, as staff to the forum, asked if I would be willing to provide some initial comments regarding today's meeting before we begin with the agenda. Given the schedules of several of the meetings and the requirement to hold a meeting on or before June 10th, it was necessary to hold this meeting on May 26th. As a reminder, it's important to point out there will be no new general fund revenue forecast presented to the forum at this meeting. Thus, we will not be considering or approving revised forecasts for fiscal year 2026 or fiscal year 2027. We will receive information on how the fiscal year-to-date actual collections are tracking compared to the Economic Forum's general fund revenue forecast approved on May 1st, 2025. Ms. Powers will provide additional information on this issue under agenda item number 9. Following public comment under agenda item number 3, we are required to elect a member to serve as chair and one to serve as vice chair for the next 2-year forecast cycle of the Economic Forum under agenda item number 4. After an overview presentation on the Economic Forum by Mr. Nakamoto, we will have a presentation by David Schmidt from the Research and Analysis Bureau at DETR on the current state employment and unemployment situation under agenda item number 7. Under the remaining agenda items, we will have presentations by staff on the type of information historically presented at the interim June meeting, as well as some administrative items in preparation for the fall meetings to be able to make the required November 15th forecast date for the approval of general fund revenue forecast for fiscal years 2027, 28, and 29. We will also have a second public comment period at the end of the agenda. I would like to thank LCB's BPS staff for all their assistance prior to the meetings for this morning. I realize it's a lot of work and appreciate everyone from BPS working with the members, presenters, staff, and public to make it possible to hold a meeting. At this point, I would like to ask the other members present to introduce themselves and make any opening comments that they would like to make before proceeding with public comment under agenda item number 3.
Thank you, Acting Chair Lewis. I appreciate the opening remarks. I just wanted to say just a couple of quick words. Obviously, we've got 2 members of the Economic Forum that have since rolled off. We now have 2 members that I wanted to welcome to the Economic Forum, but really wanted to just take an opportunity to say thank you to our former chair, Linda Rosenthal, who spent quite a bit of time with this committee and was responsible for guiding this committee during some pretty tumultuous times in the post-Great Recession era, and just wanted to say that I think I speak for all of us when I say that we really appreciate all of her effort and time and commitment to this committee. It was really an impressive performance, and she filled a much-needed role. Also wanted to thank Marvin Levitt, who has extensive experience in public finance and state finances and was a remarkable member of this committee. I had the opportunity to both sit on this committee with both of them and on the other side of the table and presented to both of those folks, and really impressed by the caliber of their intellect and their ability to navigate the duties and responsibilities of this committee. So I just wanted to recognize them and say thank you for their commitment and their work over the years. They did a tremendous job. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments? All right, before we go to proceeding to item 3 for public comment, Mr. Nakamoto has asked to make some remarks under this agenda item for the benefit of members and public who follow Economic Forum and its meetings.
Good morning, Madam Acting Chair, members of the Economic Forum. For the record, my name is Michael Nakamoto, and I serve as Chief Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. And as part of the staff to this committee, I wanted to welcome you all to the Economic Forum, some of you again, and thank you all for your service. And I would echo Mr. Gordon's remarks, thanking Linda Rosenthal and Marvin Levitt, who both served on this body very capably over the past 15, almost 20 years in the case of the former chair. So as I noted, I am part of the staff for this committee. The Economic Forum is jointly staffed between the Fiscal Analysis Division and the Governor's Finance Office. Most of my staff is up in Carson City today. Susanna Powers, Haley Owens, and Christine Jones, who you've all met, as well as our Secretary, Basha Thomas. Christy Kaiser is also sitting in. She is one of our new secretaries in the Fiscal Analysis Division. She is not necessarily staffing the forum, but she is observing and learning. At this point, because we are staffed jointly with the Governor's Finance Office, Dr. Solorio from the Governor's Finance Office also has his staff that I would like him to come up and introduce as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Mauricio Solorio Arteaga, and I'm the Chief Economist for the Governor's Finance Office. And my colleague Said Uddin, Dr. Said Uddin, is a former academic that he just joined our team.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I think this is the point where we can move on to public comment. Thank you.
Excellent. I will go ahead and open the public comment period. Is there anyone who has any comments from Carson City today?
Nobody up here, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no one, is there anyone from Las Vegas who has any public comments today? Seeing no one, is there anyone on the phone that has public comments today?
Thank you. The public lines are open and working, but there are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
All right, thank you. I guess we can go ahead and close public comment and move on to item 4. Item 4 is the election of chair and vice chair. Just any comments?
Sure, I'll make a comment. This is Brian Gordon. For the record, I would like to nominate Jen Lewis as chair of the Economic Forum.
I would second that.
All right, please vote.
Aye. Oh,
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. And for vice chair, does anyone have two equally capable guys who've been on for a while? Oh, I don't know if we have a coin.
Oh, you're the chair now.
Madam Chair, I'd be willing to make a motion.
Sorry, say it again.
I'd be willing to nominate Mr. Gordon to be the vice chair of the Economic Forum. He has the pleasure of knowing me before this meeting and thus the misfortune of receiving my nomination this morning.
Totally fine. I would second that.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Please vote. All in favor of Brian Gordon becoming the vice chair?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And that moves us on to the approval minutes of the December 5th, 2025 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the notes or the minutes from the meeting?
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Madam
Is it appropriate for us to vote on the minutes if we weren't present at the meeting? Necessary or appropriate, I guess.
This feels like a good staff question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. I think that is at the discretion of each member, whether they feel that it is appropriate for them to vote or not.
Madam Acting Chair, it's my intent to abstain, having not been at the meeting.
All right. I
Same.
guess we'll need a
you.
motion.
I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes.
There is a motion on the floor. Please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Second.
Oh, second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so we have 2 abstentions, is that correct? Perfect. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and move on to overview of the Economic Forum and Technical Advisory Committee on future state revenues.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Economic Forum. Again, for the record, my name is Michael Nakamoto. I'm with the Fiscal Analysis Division. The presentation that I'm going to be giving today, several of you have heard before, but because we have new members and also for the benefit of the public, we give this presentation at the outset to give everybody kind of the overview of what this body is about, what its duties and responsibilities are, and everything that goes along with it. I would note, though, before I get too far into it, meeting materials for today's meeting are on the Legislative Council Bureau's website. Under the interim committees page, there is a meeting page specifically devoted to the Economic Forum, and all of the meeting materials that we will be discussing today are available on that webpage. That having been said, though, Madam Chair, the Economic Forum is a statutory body that can be found in NRS 353.226 through NRS 353.229. So everything that we are doing today is based on statutory requirements and obligations. This is a meeting that is subject to the open meeting law, so everything has been posted to the public. The agenda was posted at least 3 days before the meeting, and we have all of the meeting materials available on the LCB's website at the interim committees page, available for all of you as well as the members of the public. So to back up, though, and this is actually coming out of a different presentation that I had given a while back about how states develop revenue forecasts. And in my research, I found that there are a number of states that do this differently. There are states that have created a body similar to this. There are states where there is a joint effort between the legislative and executive branches, usually the elected officials or persons who are employed within those capacities. And then there is the third different way, which is the legislative branch does their own forecast and the executive branch does their own forecast, and they may or may not agree. And that was kind of the case in Nevada throughout its history until the 1993 session. So during the 1993 session, Senator William Raggio in Senate Bill 23 created the Economic Forum, the body that we know today. And so it is 5 members of the private sector, or let me rephrase, they cannot be employees of state government. There is no prohibition against local government employees. They just cannot be employed by the state. All of you are appointed by the governor. 2 of the 5 of you are nominated based on legislative leadership. So the Senate Majority Leader and the Assembly Speaker each have a nomination, and then the governor chooses the other 3. And this body in statute is required to prepare forecasts for the state's unrestricted general fund before and during the legislative session for that current fiscal year, as well as the 2 fiscal years of the upcoming biennium. There is, in terms of the history of when this has to occur, when Senate Bill 23 was originally created in the 93 session, the first forecast that the governor was required to use for the executive budget had to be completed on or before December 1st of the even numbered year, so right before the legislative session. And then the second forecast, any revisions to that original forecast, needed to be approved on or before May 1st. And that is the forecast that the legislature will use to close the legislatively approved budget at the end of each fiscal year. There have been changes to those dates. Assembly Bill 332 of the 2011 session changed the on or before December 1st to on or before December 3rd. It also added requirements for interim meetings such as the one that we're having today, and I'll talk about that a little bit more under a future agenda item. And then during the 2025 session, there were 2 bills that were passed that changed both of the dates. And we will definitely talk about that under another agenda item because it's going to depend on the scheduling of future meetings. Senate Bill 419 from last session changed the May 1st date to April 1st, so it just rolled that back by a month. So instead of being in Carson City toward the end of session, it'll be more in the middle of the session. And then Assembly Bill 356 from last session changed that on or before December 3rd to on or before November 15th to give additional time relating to the forecast and in associated tasks relating to the forecast. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in NRS 353-226, that is the section of the NRS that dictates the membership. The 5 members who are sitting before me or up in Carson City. Again, all of the members are appointed to 2-year terms, which started in May. 3 of them were selected by the governor, 2 of them selected by legislative leadership, and otherwise the members need to be experts in finance, accounting, economics, business, something that is relevant to the state economy, but they cannot be employed by the state, including being employed by the Nevada System of Higher Education, or NSHE. In NRS 353-227, that dictates the staffing of the committee. It is, as we previously mentioned, jointly staffed between the Fiscal Analysis Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau and the Governor's Finance Office. Normally, the Economic Forum duties are handled by the Fiscal Analysis Division, excluding travel arrangements are made by GFO. GFO is primarily responsible for staffing the Technical Advisory Committee, which I'll talk to when I get to NRS 353-229. Under NRS 353-228, that specifies the meeting dates. So on or before November 15th of the even numbered year, before the legislative session, on or before April 1st of the odd numbered year during the legislative session, and then 2 interim meetings that are required to occur, one on or before December 10th of the even numbered year, and then, of the odd numbered year, and then on or before June 10th of the even numbered year, which is the meeting that we are having today. In conjunction with these interim meetings, which do not require forecasts, rather it's just updates on economic conditions, there is a requirement for a report to be given to the Interim Finance Committee at its next appropriate meeting, and we will discuss that under a future agenda item. The Economic Forum is only required to release or have meetings on those dates or release their forecasts on or before those dates. There is no statutory requirement for this body to meet at any other point. In fact, in preparing those forecasts, they can meet as little or as much as they want. So when we get to scheduling of future meetings, that will be part of the discussion. And lastly, under NRS 353-229, that creates the Technical Advisory Committee on Future State Revenues, which we also call the TAC. That is made up of 7 different individuals, the bulk of whom are employed by the state. So within the Fiscal Analysis Division, my bosses, the Senate Fiscal Analyst and the Assembly Fiscal Analyst, who are Wayne Thorley and Sarah Kaufman, the Chief of the Budget Division at the Governor's Finance Office, who's Tiffany Greenemeyer, the Head of the Research Division at the Employment and Security Division of the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation, and I might have butchered Mr. Schmidt's title, but David Schmidt, who will be doing the presentation, serves in that capacity. The Vice Chancellor of Finance with the Nevada System of Higher Education, who is Brody Leiser. He just took that position at the beginning of April, coming from our office in the Fiscal Analysis Division. The State Demographer, Christopher Wright, who's employed at the Department of Taxation. He periodically gives presentations. And then the Chair of the Committee on Local Government Finance, who is Marvin Levitt, who was previously a member of this body. Now he has gone back to just being the chair of the Committee on Local Government Finance. As many of you will recall, because he was on the Economic Forum, he did not think it was appropriate to serve as on the Technical Advisory Committee as well. So he normally appointed somebody to do that. But in this instance, now that he is back to being the chair of the Committee on Local Government Finance, I'll have conversations with him about how he wants to handle that going forward. So basically the way that the Technical Advisory Committee functions is they are statutorily required to assist the Economic Forum in doing whatever it takes to get those forecasts done. Historically, what that has meant is that the Economic Forum will meet and consider the so-called major revenues, such as sales and use tax, modified business tax, the gaming percentage fee, and then the Technical Advisory Committee is tasked with developing forecasts for the so-called non-majors. There's about 100 different revenues in the State General Fund. The Economic Forum deals with less than 10 of them. The other 90 go to the Technical Advisory Committee. They approve of a forecast. It comes back to this body, and it is ultimately approved or modified by this body for those minor revenues as well as for tax credits. So that's basically all I had as an overview for this body. It is here to help create a revenue forecast. You all will approve revenue forecasts in November and May that get used by the governor and the legislature. And we as your staff are here to help assist with that. With that, again, Madam Chair, that is all I had, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that comprehensive update. Does anyone have questions, comments? Looks like we're good to move on to the next one, but thank you again for your report. And it looks like our first report is from David Schmidt, the Chief Economist of and Research Analysis Bureau for Dieter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the forum. Answer Mr. Nakamoto, I think you got it about as correct as possible. I am the Chief Economist of the Research and Analysis Bureau within Dieter, which I think is the successor entity to the Research Division at the Employment Security Division in Dieter, which is how I came to be involved with all of this. But I'm here today because our Bureau works closely with the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and so I want to give an update on where we stand with the state's employment and unemployment data. This is a slide that will give you kind of a snapshot of some of the high-level numbers that are going on with state employment and unemployment. Currently, as of April, our average or our annual growth rate for our current employment statistics is 1.9%, which gives us a total of just over 1.6 million jobs. Excuse me. Our top industries are, in terms of growth rate, are professional, scientific, and technical services, construction, information, healthcare, arts and entertainment, recreation. That 1.9% growth, to put it in context, is roughly double the second fastest growing state right now. So Nevada's growth rate is actually very, very good. Our unemployment rate is 5.3%. That's one of the higher rates in the nation. I will get into that a little bit more later. It's about a percentage point higher than the national rate of 4.3%, gives us a total of about 90,000 unemployed people. The groups that have somewhat higher unemployment rates, if you break that out, include men, people who are Black or Hispanic, or people with a high school degree or less. And I also think it's important to talk about labor force participation because, as you will see later, I think that ties in very closely with that unemployment rate number, though it's not one that generates as many headlines. Our labor force participation rate currently 63.6%. That's about 1.5 points higher than the national rate of 61.8. And when you talk about labor force participation, you're talking about the share of the civilian non-institutionalized population 16 plus. So you're not in a prison, you're not in a nursing home, you're over 16 and you're not in the military. Everybody else, we talk about that population and then say how many of them are either actively working or currently looking for work and want a job. The flip side of that, the difference between the rates that we see in 100% is everybody else. Of those in Nevada over the last 11 months on average, over 914,000, almost 915,000 of them do not want a job. We're talking about people who are retired. We're talking about people who are stay-at-home parents. We're talking about people who, for whatever reason, when we try to survey them through the BLS, they say, nope, don't want a job right now. That leaves about 54,000 people who do say they want a job. Because when you measure unemployment, we have very bright lines that we try to draw in the murky experience of everyday individuals. So we say, okay, there's 54,000 people who want a job. Of that 54,000, 36,000 say, but I didn't look for work at all in the last year. To be counted as unemployed, you have to have looked for work in the last 4 weeks. And so most of those people who say they want a job have not looked in a while. Sure, I want a job, but I'm not actively pursuing one. Of that, about 13,000 are available to work right now. And so participation has impacts on unemployment as people's responses to this survey shift. How much do you want a job? How much are you looking? Are you looking now? Are you available now? The answers to all of these questions help to split people into these two buckets, which is why participation and unemployment can be very closely related or be kind of far apart depending on the demographics of a particular state. And if you heard me say our growth rate is 1.9%, and you were listening to the forum when I presented in the past, you might be feeling a bit of whiplash because the last numbers that I came in with, everything is pretty flat. We're trending at below 1%, close to 0%. Our originally released data for December actually showed a 0.6% decline in jobs in the state. And I think it's important to highlight, especially as the forum is considering and thinking about the state of the Nevada economy going forward, to really highlight this and show where did these numbers change, where did they come from, what is driving this, can we trust it? And so when we release data every year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will go through a process of taking their survey-based monthly employment estimates and then truing them up to data that is more comprehensive. It has a bigger reach, but it's slower to come out. And when they went through that process, we had a big change in our employment. And that was the driver of the shift from down 0.6% to when the January data came out, we said, actually, our annual growth rate is now 1.9%. Biggest single piece of this was a large gain in the third quarter of 2025. But what drove that gain was the quarterly census of employment and wages, where basically we take the reports that employers file through the unemployment insurance system. We get that data as they present or as they report it to DETR, and then we are able to basically count the vast majority of employment. A little bit more than 95% of the employers in the state are covered by the unemployment insurance program. And so we get this pretty comprehensive data of how many people were working for you last quarter. And then we take another quarter and go through that data. We review it, we clean it up. We find the employer who reported total wages in the count of total employees. Say, nope, you did not have 50,000 people, you had 10. And so we clean up that data. But that means that from the quarter to complete, a month for employers to report, and then another quarter for us to go through it. It takes about 6 months for this data to follow up. And most people don't want to know what happened 6 months ago. They want to know what happened last month. They really want to know what's happening right now. And that's where this difference between the survey-based monthly job estimates and the quarterly census of employment and wages from the UI program kind of meet. And so once a year, we true up these numbers. I think it's also important to note it wasn't just that benchmark. We had a pretty big gain of about 30,000 jobs in the middle of 2025. As we look at it now, if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website today, you would look back at December and go, I don't see that negative 0.6. I see growth of close to 2% because they have revised the original data that came out because of this new benchmark. And so actually, as we sit here, the most current data available is through April. We have actually been leading the nation in job growth for 10 months in a row. And so our current picture is pretty strong, much stronger than even the number 2 state. And I think it's also encouraging if we look at the data through April. That survey-based estimate, if you just take the last 3 months and you annualize that rate, so we're not talking about the benchmark, we're not talking about changes in the past, we're talking about what is our current picture as we sit here today. That annualized growth rate is still 1.8%. And so we're still seeing that strength even after the revisions that we saw 10 months ago. And so the picture is better than we thought it was, and it's continuing to be in a pretty strong place overall. And so I mentioned Nevada's growing at double the rate of the second fastest growing state. Half of states right now are losing jobs. And so nationally, the picture is pretty soft. And so for us to be growing at nearly 2% is actually a pretty remarkable number. And where we're growing is also important. So this slide has most of, but not quite all, the individual industries and breakouts that we have, where Nevada is either number 1 or number 2 in job growth. The actual numbers are up on the slides, and you can certainly read them. As you look across all of these industries, healthcare, on the left-hand side in the middle, is the only one that as of March, every state in the nation plus DC was actually growing in. If you look at April, because that data just came out on Friday, DC is now negative. And so in all of these sectors, there's a number of states that are losing jobs, which makes sense if half of the states are losing jobs overall. Healthcare has been the biggest driver. A lot of the commentary on the employment data that we had in the last year was be careful about the job growth that we have because so much of it is dependent on healthcare employment that's growing because we have an aging population. It was the one sector that was kind of keeping the economy afloat in terms of job gains toward the end of 2025. And you can see it's still, even after benchmarks for all of these states, a primary source of job growth. But in Nevada, we actually have a lot of different industries of various sizes that are growing. Some of these arts, entertainment, and recreation, leisure and hospitality, or rather, arts, entertainment, and recreation is growing. This is a subset of leisure and hospitality. It's the other piece of accommodation and food service, which is much larger. Management of companies and enterprises, this is kind of your companies that, or business establishments that are in the process of administering and managing overall companies. This is something that's shifted a lot since we've seen growth in remote and telework. Because as we measure it, if you have 5 people in the state, even if the company does something different overall, if the activities of the people in the work sites that are in Nevada is all about management. If you have your CEO, your COO, and their executive staff in Nevada and the company itself is elsewhere, we would count you as management of companies and enterprises because that's what you do here. But that's something that has grown a lot in the age of remote and telework. But also professional and business services, engineering, accounting, lawyers, architects, research, science, professional scientific and technical services, manufacturing. We have several different industries where we're growing that are fairly large and fairly diverse. As we look at wages, we also have estimates of that. We see that In construction and goods producing industries, our wages tend to outpace the nation. In most, we tend to be around 30th in terms of our overall average wage levels. If you look at the change in wages over the last year, construction is one that's seen a lot of growth. This was kind of a conundrum last year because we would say construction is shedding a lot of jobs, but the wages are rising rapidly, and that seems to be kind of challenging because if it were a lack of demand, you wouldn't expect to see the wage growth that we're seeing. With the revisions, a lot of the survey-based drop that was there in the construction industry was essentially wiped away. That was the largest piece of the revision that we had, is that construction was no longer a dead weight dragging down our job gains. It has instead held fairly steady, while we're still seeing acceleration in the wages that are being paid to construction. I would highlight, as you look at this chart, leisure and hospitality, large industry in the state. Private service producing, very broad industry. Total private sector, trade, transportation, and utilities. All of these see wage growth over the last year on average that's close to 4% or less, and I flag that because that's about what our current CPI-based inflation measure is at. And so these are industries where you're either starting to see real wages starting to decline or just barely holding steady. So we have a few things that are helping to drive real wages higher, but the overall picture is a lot more muted in terms of those wage gains. A question that I've often gotten in the past as I look through, or I presented what's going on with these different deployment sectors, is can you give me more detail about what exactly is growing and what's happening? And so I have a series of charts here. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I want to give you some context about what we're looking at. So these are going to come from that quarterly census of employment and wages. It's the third quarter of 2025, so it is a little bit in the past. It is not seasonally adjusted at all. It is what happened in the third quarter of 2025. Some things will shoot up and then drop back very quickly. And so just everything is presented as an annual change. So we're comparing like period to like period. But within intra-quartile changes, we're going to see different activity there. The picture will give you a size of total employment for those industries that we can release data for. This is important because since this comes direct from employers, it's subject to confidentiality rules. And so if there's an industry that employs a lot of people and is really dominant in the state as a whole, that there's maybe not a lot of competitors or not a lot of large competitors, where releasing the data would basically be like releasing the data for that company, it's not included here. And so I'll highlight that, but it's important to know it's fairly but not totally comprehensive. And then finally, as you look at the charts, you'll see that there's darker and lighter orange color that shows across the state for all of the level of detail that's provided, how high or low are the average wages compared to other industries. And so to look at construction, the 23 here looks at the broad construction industry, 22, 21, those are higher level sectors like mining or utilities. I think it's encouraging to see that there's a lot of growth in a lot of different pieces. Construction is kind of unique in that a lot of the employment comes from contractors and not, an entity that does X. We would really love to know, is this residential construction? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Like, what are they building? What is driving that demand? We can see that a little bit. Toward the bottom of the chart, you have commercial building construction, which added 1,300 workers. And so that is the companies that manage building commercial office spaces. Electrical contractors and electricians, also a big source of gains. Plumbing and HVAC, another area where we're growing. Residential construction, down 131 jobs. So this gives you kind of an idea of the mix of where are we adding jobs or not. Flipping to the NAICS that start with 3. This is manufacturing, and you will note battery manufacturing does not appear on this chart. That's because we know that it exists in the state. We can talk about it from other sources, but if we were to release the employment and wage data here, because it's so concentrated in one or two businesses, showing that data on this chart would be kind of like releasing their data. But you can see overall here, the gains outside of that industry, some up, some down, not a lot of systemic activity taking place. For retail trade, wholesale trade, and then transportation and warehousing. That's what we have when we have a NAICS that starts with 4. The biggest down here, general warehousing and storage, down about 1,100 jobs in the third quarter of 2025. We do see some gains in supermarkets, in warehousing activity, and in new car dealerships were some of the ones that stood out as having, plus several hundred jobs over in NAICS 44 and 45. Professional information, financial, NAICS that start with 5 are all kind of similar in this way. Where this is in Industry 51, you have information. So I would highlight software publishers. Currently about 7,000 workers, up about 1,000 over the year. You also have computer system design and related services over on the far left, up 634 jobs. Lawyers, up 547 jobs. Engineering services, up 1,100 jobs. And so as you look across this one, this is one of the charts that I'm really excited about because you can see how diverse the gains are. That 2% growth that we're averaging overall right now is spread out across a lot of different industries. And I think that's a really encouraging story for the state of our economy. Education and healthcare, those are the NAICS that start with 6. Again, here you can see a lot of growth in a lot of places. That growth in healthcare, nearly 5%, steady across the country, and you can see why if you look here. You have community care facilities for the elderly, nursing care facilities, services for the elderly and disabled. There's a very common theme because a lot of our healthcare growth is being driven by an aging population, and that is certainly reflected in the individual data that we report here. Also, generally doctors' offices and hospitals also adding a fair number of jobs. Where you see some declines taking place are in the childcare and nursery side, and so we're shifting our healthcare employment a little bit away from some of the focus on younger individuals in the state and toward services for an aging population. Turning to NAICS that start with 7, this is your leisure and hospitality. Interesting story and a long ongoing trend. Casino hotel employment has been pretty flat, and I will talk about that a little bit more at the wrap up. Where we've seen more growth here is in the restaurant side and on the arts, entertainment, and recreation side. If you're squinting, trying to see what the very dark orange box is over at the far right there, that's spectator sports. And so if you are a business that's involved in providing spectator sports, you tend to have relatively high wages on average. And finally, other personal services. NAICS 8 is kind of a catch-all in a lot of ways. The biggest job change here, kind of surprising at first for me, is way over on the right, nearly at the top. So it's a very tiny box, currently employs about 58 workers, but a year ago it employed about 1,000 workers. And this is where caution with the QCW is important, because that small little orange box right now is political organizations, the committee to elect so-and-so. In 2024, in the third quarter, big spike in employment. 2025, not so much, because a lot of this is short-term employment that pops in around election season and has very dramatic swings in this category that because they, even if we were adjusting this seasonally, would be harder to pick up because it's not an annual trend, it's a every other year kind of trend. And so the details with our employment data can go pretty deep. But I think that the big thing that I want to highlight is the diversity of the industries where we're seeing gains. We're not just seeing like, hey, we opened facility X and it's huge, but if facility X goes away, we're in trouble. We're seeing a lot of growth in a lot of different places, which I think tells a pretty positive story for our economy overall. Turning from employment to unemployment labor force participation. I mentioned we have one of the higher unemployment rates in the country. We also have an above average labor force participation rate. Our current unemployment rate is 5.3%. I like to say that it's higher than other states, but it's not high. 5% unemployment is not a number that I look at and I feel a lot of trepidation. Back a few decades ago when I was in college, 5% unemployment was pretty close to the estimate of what's the unemployment rate that you can sustain nationally without accelerating inflation. That estimate has drifted down over time. But sometimes we still hold on to the things that we learn when we first learn them. And so I still think 5% unemployment, not a very high place. What matters a lot more in my mind is why. Is someone unemployed because they have lost their job and they are out looking for something, desperately trying to find something because they can't make ends meet? That's going to be someone in a very different place from someone that's like, hey, I've heard things are pretty decent in Nevada. I'm going to move there and see if I can find a job. You're looking for a job and not looking in both cases, but why? And the circumstances behind it can be very different. And we can pick up a little bit of that by looking at labor force participation. And so as a thought exercise, writing out math in text is bad. And again, I won't read this, but imagine if Nevada had the nation's labor force participation rate of 61.8% to highlight how much these two numbers are related. If you assume, one, we had the national participation rate, and two, we had the same number of people working, you go through the math here and you end up with a difference of about 48,000 people. And in this hypothetical, our unemployment rate would be 2.5%, not 5.3%. And so our higher unemployment rate is driven a lot because we also have this higher level of labor force participation. And I think that's important because if you look at the distribution of unemployment labor force participation among the states, just because you have a low unemployment rate does not mean things are good. Low unemployment good, high unemployment bad is kind of a false picture of things, because if you consider this chart, we have labor force participation vertical, unemployment rate horizontal. Up in the top left, you have that high participation, low unemployment quadrant. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, New Hampshire. You might think that this is the envy of other states because your unemployment is low, your participation is high. But imagine you're a business trying to operate in that state. You want to open a facility and find some workers. You already have a higher than average share of your existing population engaged in the workforce, either employed or unemployed. And of that already higher engaged share in the labor force, a higher percentage of them are working than normal. And so where are you going to find more workers to be able to expand, to be able to do new things? There is a constraint on that labor market because the participation is high and the unemployment rate is low. If you move to the bottom left quadrant, here you have low participation, low unemployment. Here, kind of the challenge is engaging people in the labor market. You have low unemployment, but you could potentially attract some of those people who are not looking, not searching into the labor force, but you have to try to do that. This would be that 48,000 people in the hypothetical from the last slide. And I like to frame it in this way, like if you had the choice, we have these 48,000 people. If they are looking for work, you're going to have a higher unemployment rate. If they are not looking for work, you'll have a lower unemployment rate, lower participation. So you would be moving kind of along a upward sloping 45-degree angle here. I think in a world where that person actually wants a job, if they are looking for work, that's a good thing because it's easier to connect them to services. They're more likely to find a job because they're already out there looking. It's harder if first you have to convince that person that yes, it's worth looking, and then try to get them a job. And so, like, I think of participation as kind of engagement in the labor force, and then unemployment rate kind of measures, like, how successful are you at turning people over from looking into finding a job? Shifting to the measures of non-participation overall, I talked about this a bit at the start, so I won't belabor it here, but the share of the population that says, nope, don't want a job, can't draw me in, I'm happy where I am, thank you very much, has been rising over time. We have an aging population, this makes sense, it's true nationally. There is a long-term, multi-decade decline in labor force participation. The share of people who want a job and either or did not search for work in the past year, a lot steadier. So we've seen pretty consistent trends there going back to 2014. I will note these are, again, 11-month averages. 11 is weird, but it's because with the federal shutdown last year, there's no data for October. And so given the choice of either sticking an October in or comparing apples to oranges, I just calculated these pulling out October from every year so that we can have consistent averages going backward through time. But those levels have been fairly static. We did see a bit of a decline in the most recent year in terms of people who say they want a job, as well as people who did not search for work in the past year. The second is a subset of the first, and so it's the same kind of overall basis that's shifting down there a little bit. As soon as you start getting into some of these smaller numbers with the CPS, it's also worth bearing in mind Nevada has a pretty small sample. We have about 800 households in the survey. We have about 600 who respond. Of that 600, then we have about 400 that are actually in the labor force. And so anything talking about the CPS survey in Nevada, even with a 12-month average, you can take with a grain of salt because those surveys can be a little bit noisy, so don't overemphasize a single month movement. Looking at the characteristics of people who are unemployed, this is total share by duration, with the gray area at the top being the longest duration, 26 weeks or 27 weeks or more. The dark blue at the bottom being very short duration, under 5 weeks unemployed. What I really see here is that if you sort of draw horizontal lines back through time, in terms of both long and short-term unemployment, our current distribution is pretty similar to where we were in 2016. 2016 is not a boom. It's not 2006. It's not 2019. It's also not a recession where we're looking at 2020 or 2010. It's kind of in the middle with that steady, ongoing job growth. And I think that's kind of the overall picture about where we are in Nevada. And so to wrap up, thinking about the outlook in particular, I mentioned that casino employment has been pretty flat. This shows for Las Vegas on top and Reno on the bottom the long-term trend in both industries. And I think it's worth noting that it has been decades since we hit peak employment in both. In Las Vegas, it comes around 2006. In Nevada, or in Reno, it comes around 1997 when the Silver Legacy opened. And so casino employment itself has not been a source of growth for a long time in the state. But Nevada as a whole has been growing pretty rapidly throughout this period. And so we have been seeing more employment in areas other than casinos. You can see this also if you look at the total share of leisure and hospitality. Not just casinos, but the leisure and hospitality industry more broadly. Nevada has the highest concentration in that industry in the nation, but that concentration has been coming down. On the left, you can see that leisure and hospitality is 22.5% of our total jobs, a little bit higher than Hawaii, and then Montana, Florida, and the rest of the states. But over the last 10 years on the right, that concentration is also down 4.2% over the last 10 years. We have been seeing smaller and smaller concentration in that sort of keystone industry for the state, but we've seen a lot of growth still taking place in other industries. And you saw that before with the QCW. You see the breadth of growth that we're seeing. I think these are some of the positive things for Nevada, that we are, in fact, diversifying. It's a thing that comes up all the time. How can we diversify? How can we shift? How can we change the mix of jobs in the state? It's happening. But it's something that happens slowly. It happened very rapidly in April of 2020. But that's not the kind of diversification we want. What we want is to see this long-term shift toward a broader array of businesses, and I think that is, in fact, what we're seeing in the state. A little bit more negative. You saw the trends in terms of total jobs. This chart, each of the 6 sections here has 6 categories in it. So what I'm doing is taking for every single state, this is as of March, not April, compared to a specific time period, here in March of 2026, then in March of 25, March of 23, March of 2020, et cetera. Are we growing now faster or slower than we were? And are we growing now or shrinking now? And were we growing then or shrinking then? And so this is kind of a comparison over time, today to then. How has our experience changed? In March of 2025, there are 7 states that were growing in March of 2025 and are growing faster in March of 2026. There's a couple of states where the state was shrinking a year ago and now it's growing, or it was shrinking a year ago but it's shrinking more slowly now. The larger experience for other states is it was growing and it's now growing more slowly, or it was growing and now it's shrinking. And so The color coding, the red or green on this chart kind of tells you the same thing, but you can see at a glance, if you look back to where we were in 23 and 17, 2014 or 2011, a lot of states are growing more slowly now than they were. The comparison to March of 2020 is the only one that's a little bit more green on average, and that's because that was the first month of the COVID pandemic, and those numbers were already getting hit in March. And so the national backdrop for the pretty good story that we have going on is growth is slowing as population growth slows. And I think that is a long-term dynamic that continues to affect us. We still have 22% of our jobs in leisure and hospitality. We still care very much what's happening in other states. And so the flip side to the Nevada's story is pretty good is that half of states that are seeing job declines could affect us. And it's one of the things that I would say I'm cautious about as I think about what our future outlook will be. Thinking about our outlook in terms of unemployment, this is a complicated chart but that basically shows the mix of unemployment due to job loss, which is on the horizontal axis, and unemployment for other reasons, not job loss, on the vertical axis. I think it's interesting because you can see that in a recession, both in the Great Recession on top, the COVID recession on bottom, the thing that really increases in a recession is people losing their jobs. It's not people unemployed for other reasons. And where we sit as of the third quarter of 2025 is right there in that range on the far bottom left, that it just is kind of normal. It might be a little bit higher in one, a little bit higher in the other, but there's clearly a cluster there of normal that's very distinct from recessions. If we were entering a recession, the thing that I would really be watching for is, are we seeing increases in that rate of job loss? We don't see that as we sit here today. So if we were to start to see that, that would be one of the potential warning signs in my book to look for. And with that, happy to answer any questions you have. Also, if there's anyone needing services, there's a list of URLs here to help connect you to the resources that the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation has on offer.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. It was really pretty interesting. I'll go ahead and ask my people here if anyone has any comments, questions. Go for it.
Thank you. Thanks for the comprehensive report, Mr. Schmidt. This was really insightful and helpful for us to, I think, get a sense of kind of where the economy's at from a job standpoint. So super helpful. I just wanted to make sure we're all thinking about this right. The benchmarking process, because I think the last time we probably had a report from you was that it was, things were a little bit more dire in some of the reports that we had seen prior to this benchmarking process. This is something you all have been doing forever since the beginning of time. And I just wanted to make sure these rankings where Nevada's ranked number one, besting the number two spot by like double the rate. All of those other states are also doing this same exact benchmarking process and a look back to get the most recent data. And so this is an apples to apples comparison across all states, and we're coming out on top in terms of our overall position. Is that fair?
David Schmidt, for the record, yes, that's correct. All of the states go through the exact same benchmarking process comprehensively from the BLS at the same time. And so as the January numbers were released for every state, that benchmark was completely comprehensive.
Okay, perfect. And then the gains that we're seeing, if I think back over the last 12 months from a leisure and hospitality standpoint, you've talked about the fact that we're seeing some diversification, and we haven't seen a significant amount of growth necessarily in leisure and hospitality. We also haven't seen any major hotel casino openings during that time frame, I don't think, which was when we kind of historically see some of those jumps in terms of the job gains. So the fact that we're even treading water or seeing modest gains, I think is a positive thing. But I think you've highlighted it a couple of times. We are seeing more diversity in where the job gains are, and frankly, probably in some higher earning types of positions in the professional and business services sector. Maybe if you have any color around that, any particular types of jobs. I know you sort of did a little bit of a deep dive on the yellow, orange charts, but within professional and business services. Are there particular ones that just stand out that might be helpful for us to think about? And I think most of those are probably at the higher or above average income range, if I'm thinking about it correctly.
Yes, David Schmidt again for the record. One of the first highlights, when I saw the jumps that we had in the benchmarking process, and I asked my staff, like, hey, we saw some big gains in this sector. What do you see as you've been going through the data? And one that was brought to my attention was software publishers, and it does show up in the publicly available data here over under the 51 section. It's an area where we've currently has, as of third quarter 25, about 7,000 workers, added about 1,000 in the past year, and has an average weekly wage $4,512 per week. And so this is an area where the number of jobs is pretty big, the wages that they earn is pretty big, and it is in that kind of diversified sector. I think as you look at like computer systems design and related services, and also some of the employment gains that we've seen in construction, where it's coming in terms of electrical contractors and HVAC and plumbing, which is part of the same thing, as well as that commercial office construction growth. I think some of that could well be tied to the growth that we've seen in terms of data centers and related workers. I think when I think of data centers, you're going to see probably more employment on the construction side. I don't know if you'll see as much in terms of individual people, but there's also the purchases of equipment that would come in with that. But I think we're seeing some of that show up in construction as well as on the computer system design professional business side of that growth. There was a pretty big gain in temporary help services, which is at the bottom left, not as high wage and occupation. This is your temporary employment agencies. This is something that can sometimes flow in counter-cyclical ways where it's hard to find a regular worker, and so we employ a temp worker instead. Or we're not certain if we want to hire a long-term worker, so we will hire a temporary worker instead. And so it can shift a lot more up or down, but it is something that has a pretty big numeric gain. And so it's one that I'm definitely at least keeping an eye on and watching. Also, I thought convention and trade show organizers is one that's under NAICS 56. It's over on the right-hand side of that particular box. Added about 881 workers. A little bit interesting to me because we've seen that slower trend in terms of tourism activity, that we saw that larger convention organization activity taking place was one that was also a bit interesting.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. It's an encouraging report, so appreciate it.
Does anyone else have any comments, questions? Lindsay up there? Any comments,
Nothing from me.
questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a really interesting report, and I guess we can move on to item, which is the presentation on the tax changes approved by the legislature during the 83rd legislative session and other actions taken during the 83rd legislative session by the interim finance committee in June 2025 and during the 36th November 2025 special session in the Economic Forum May 21st 2025 forecast for fiscal year 2025, fiscal year 2026, and fiscal year 2027, adjusted for actions taken during the 83rd 2025 legislative session and by the interim finance committee in June 2025.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Those of you who have previously served on this body at the last meeting in December, this is a repeat of that agenda item. And I joked then that when the entire agenda item was read out, the presentation was done. But I'm not going to do that today. What I am going to do is I'll go through the table fairly quickly, just kind of give a high-level overview. And this is, again, primarily for the benefit of the new members as well as for the public who may not have heard this at the last meeting. So beginning on page 49 of the Economic Forum packet, which all of you have in printed form and which is available on our website for the people who may be viewing this online. are a set of tables that our office prepares at the conclusion of each legislative session for our appropriations report. And so the context behind this is the Economic Forum comes in and came in May of 2025 and approved a forecast. When we get to 2027, that meeting will happen in April. Regardless of when the meeting occurs, though, there is still quite a bit of session that occurs. And so there are often actions that are taken during the legislative session between the meeting date and the end of the session, which may affect the forecasts. And so historically what happens is the Fiscal Analysis Division staff goes through and evaluates all of the legislation that was passed that was not accounted for by your forecasts, and we make adjustments to the forecasts so that your forecasts then basically match what the law is supposed to say. As you are all aware, or whether you are aware or not, the Economic Forum always does its forecasts under current law. So even if there are bills pending in the legislature during the session, we don't take those into account as part of the forecasts. We don't take them into account until after they are passed and signed into law, based on whatever the effective date is. So the set of tables that I'm going to go through are what we put together at the conclusion of the legislative session in September or October or so to document all of those actions. But then you'll note at the top of page 49 for table 1, we say updated November 25th, 2025. And this is because of the special session that occurred not too long after we put these tables together and put out the appropriations report. The 36th special session had a number of actions that didn't necessarily affect the forecast, but we still wanted to document them for everybody's information because they will affect forecasts potentially going forward. So table 1 that begins on page 49 is basically a summary of the forecast that was approved at that May 1st meeting before legislative adjustments. So on that first page, you can see the total amount of the forecasts before tax credits for FY25, FY26, and FY 2027. Then there's the commerce tax credit that was approved by the Economic Forum on that at that May 1st meeting. And then under tax credit programs, and throughout the next few pages, there is a summary of all of the tax credit programs that are offered that affect state general fund revenue and the forecasts that were approved by this body. So on page 49, you have the film tax credit program, originally approved in Senate Bill 165 of the 2013 session. The economic development transferable tax credits approved in SB 1 of the 29th special session, which we would refer to as the Faraday credits, because that was the original plan for those, and those are on page 50. On page 51 are what we call the Catalyst Account Transferable Tax Credit Program that was originally approved in 2015. On page 52 is the Nevada New Markets Jobs Act Tax Credit Program, originally approved in the 2013 session and renewed twice since then. And then on page 53 are the Educational Choice Scholarship Tax Credit Program, originally approved in the 2015 session, as well as the College Savings Plan Employer Matching Contribution Program, also approved in 2015. On page 54 are the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program, approved originally in 2019, and then the Baseball Stadium Transferable Tax Credit Programs, approved in Senate Bill 1 of the 35th special session back in 2023. And so then at the bottom of page 54, you get the total of the tax credits, and then that unadjusted forecast net of tax credits. Beginning on page 55 is table 2. And this goes through, and this is the table that I'm going to spend the most time on as part of this presentation, and just kind of walk through some of the actions that were taken that would or could affect the forecast. Now, normally when we do this agenda item and talk about legislative actions, we talk about actions approved by the legislature. But during the 2025 session and in the aftermath of the 2025 session, there were a number of actions that happened independently of the legislative session, whether it was another agency or the Interim Finance Committee taking an action that affected general fund revenues. And so the first one that you see there on page 55 under taxes is one of those instances where it was an agency that actually acted and affected the forecast. And so on May 15th, 2025, so just about 2 weeks after the Economic Forum forecast, the Gaming Control Board entered into a stipulation for settlement with Wynn Resorts for a disciplinary action. And that disciplinary action resulted in a $5.5 million fine being levied upon Wynn, which they immediately paid. And so we adjusted the forecast to account for that. So because we knew now information that we didn't know on May 1st, that there would be this additional revenue that would go into the state general fund. The other tax bill, or a bill that affected it, something that we classify as taxes, was Assembly Bill 471 dealing with the other tobacco products tax. And this basically created a retail tax on remote sellers of other tobacco products that is similar to the wholesale tax that we have that you do forecasts for or that are designated to the Technical Advisory Committee. So the estimates for that tax based on its January 1st, 2026 effective date were approximately $500,000 in the current fiscal year, FY 2026, and $1 million in FY 2027. Under
Madam Chair.
use of money and property.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had a question if it's appropriate at this time.
Do you prefer to keep going or do you want to stop for a question?
Madam Chair, I can answer questions now. That's fine.
Sure. Okay. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a quick question, just process related. Mr. Nakamoto, in the $5.5 million case where that was known later, was the 2025 legislature allowed to appropriate that $5.5 million before the end of the legislative session? Did they then get access to those funds after the adjustment was made by the staff?
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for the question. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. When we find out information like that, because we wear both hats, we wear Economic Forum staff hat as well as legislative staff hat, we made sure that elected officials knew that this money was available. Basically, what I would do, or what we would do as part of the tax team, is we would let our bosses, Mr. Thorley and Ms. Kaufman, know. They would add it to the fund balance on their side, and they would recognize that it is available revenue that could be used for appropriations toward the end of session. And because it happened on May 15th, we had about just over 2 weeks where the legislature could have taken actions that would have affected those revenues. That's kind of where they step in on the budget side to make those decisions or not.
That's great. Thank you very much for that answer. Lucky them in this case, sounds like.
All right. Again, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Under use of money and property, there are going to be a number of repayments to GTO, the Governor's Technology Office, or from that office. And so basically what happens in a number of instances, and there was legislation both during the regular session and the special session, where the legislature provided a general fund appropriation to a certain agency. In this case, it was the Governor's Technology Office for a number of IT improvements. And so in the instances here, It doesn't always happen this way. The state can, or the legislature can make appropriations to agencies and not require a payback. But in the instance of all of these that are listed under use of money and property, there is a repayment that is required back from that agency to basically a loan from the state general fund to that agency. In these instances, the repayment terms specify that the repayment begins in FY 2028, so outside of the current biennium. That is why you don't see any numbers here, because we're not adding any revenue as part of that repayment. But we are good at and like documenting this kind of information, A, so that you and the public are aware, and B, so that we don't forget, because sometimes we forget things like this, and that is not always my thing that I like doing. So you can see that there are 3 listed on page 55, and then 2 that are listed on page 56. And again, all of these will begin in FY 2028. So when we meet and consider forecasts coming up in the fall, we will have information on these, and we will include them in the forecasts for FY 2028 and FY 2029. But for now, there is no adjustment to the forecast. So under other revenue, there are 2 items to talk about. The first is in Senate Bill 225, which created a presidential preference primary filing fee. So if you want to run for president and enter into the primary, you have to pay the Secretary of State's office a $1,000 fee. That took effect at July 1st, 2025, but because we're not going to have any presidential primaries until 2028, we do not have any money that will be coming in until FY 2028. And again, this is something that will be built into the forecast that we do, that we're presenting to you in the fall. And then lastly, under cost recovery plan, this is not necessarily legislation, but rather there is an adjustment to something called the statewide cost allocation plan. So basically, agencies are charged different amounts in their budgets for various services that they are receiving from state agencies, whether it's the governor's technology office, the attorney general's office, and so on. And that money gets deposited in the state general fund. When we come to you on May 1st, during the legislative session, and then coming up now in April, we have the best information based on where the budget is at that exact moment. But the budget is still in flux and will be in flux all the way through to the end of session. And so we don't have the full amount of what this payment is until we get to after the end of the session. We know where everything lands, and then we make the adjustment to get it to where we believe it is based on how the budget was approved. And so then you can see the net impacts of the adjustments to revenue, the addition of the $5.5 million in FY 2025, and then a slight negative impact in FY 2026 of about $422,000 or $421,000, and then approximately $443,000 to the positive in FY 2027. And so that is the net impact of the forecasts with those adjustments, but then before tax credits. And so then at the bottom of this, we talk about the adjustments to tax credits, of which there was one. And so this is another instance where it happened outside of the legislative session, but rather it was an action taken by the Interim Finance Committee on June 18th of 2025. So under the provisions of Senate Bill 1 of the 29th special session, what we would call the Faraday tax credits, there were $36 million of tax credits that were available, and I may be misremembering that total amount, but they were originally designed to be given to Faraday Future, the car manufacturer who is going to build their manufacturing plant out at Apex in North Las Vegas. That never occurred, but the law was still out there, and anybody who qualified could apply to the Office of Economic Development for those tax credits. The legislature back in 2019 put guardrails on that to make sure that they had some control over when those tax credits were issued. And so by doing that, they required the Interim Finance Committee to approve the issuance of the credits. And so the last time that that will happen under that law was in June of 2025, where Redwood Materials, the battery recyclers who have a plant up in Story County were issued $4,303,500 in transferable tax credits, which we anticipated at the time would be taken in FY 2026 due to the lateness and the fiscal year ending about less than 2 weeks after that occurred. To my knowledge, most, if not all of those have been used, but because no credits under those provisions can be issued after June 30th, 2025. That is the last time, unless there is a law change, that we will see tax credits under that program issued. But that the issuance of those credits and the approval of them by the Interim Finance Committee resulted in a downward adjustment to the forecast in FY 2026. And so then at the bottom, you can see what the net change is after the tax credits are taken into account. And then on page 57 are any adjustments made to the state education fund, remembering that this is our tables that we take out of our appropriations report. The state education fund is not necessarily relevant to the duties of the Economic Forum, but if there had been any changes that would have documented or been made that would have affected the state education fund and K-12 education, we would have documented them here. And then lastly, on page 58 is the full forecast with all of the adjustments, the tax credits that were forecasts that were approved by the legislature, as well as the adjustments that were made by the Interim Finance Committee. And so that kind of sums up all of the actions that were taken. And then lastly, I'm not going to spend any time other than to point it out. On page 65 is the legislative or the Economic Forum's May 1st, 2025 forecast for FY 2025, FY 2026, and FY 2027, adjusted for all of the legislative actions or other actions that I previously discussed. You'll note, though, that we do not have a updated November 25th, 2025 note on this because none of the actions taken during the special session actually had any adjustments to the forecast, but we still wanted to document them in those previous tables again so that we didn't forget or that I didn't forget. So with that, Madam Chair and members of the forum, that's all I had under this agenda item, and I would be glad to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nakamoto. Do any of the members have any comments, questions? Ms. Anderson up there?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for checking on me.
Nothing down here. Thank you again, Mr. Nakamoto. And that brings us to a report and discussion of fiscal year 2026 year-to-date actual collections compared to the Economic Forum May 1st, 2025 forecast, adjusted for actions taken during the 83rd 2025 legislative sessions and by the Interim Finance Committee, June 2025.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Susanna.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone, the members of the Economic Forum. For the record, Susanna Powers, Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I have presentation also along with this agenda item, and it should be on the screen momentarily. There it is. Agenda item 9 begins on page 75 of the meeting packet. So let me do a quick introduction first. Our year-to-date revenue update includes smaller number of tables than usual. Normally, in this June meeting, or I guess we're meeting in May, but we call it the June meeting, normally tables 1 through 4 are included in this agenda item and compare the current fiscal year-to-date actual general fund revenue with the Economic Forum forecast. However, this agenda item begins with Table 5, as Tables 1 through 4 have been omitted due to temporary distortions in revenue reporting. The Department of Taxation is currently modernizing its tax collection system, and that transition is affecting the timing of when the state receives certain revenues In addition, administrative factors, along with the cyber attack that occurred last fall, are affecting the timing of how certain revenues are posted. As a result, some comparisons between actual revenues and the Economic Forum forecast are temporarily distorted. Specifically, certain fiscal year 2025 year-to-date revenues are understated due to timing-related delays, and certain fiscal year 2026 year-to-date revenues include one-time events that inflate collections. We often encounter timing issues or isolated events that can temporarily distort the revenue tracking process. However, this is the first time those impacts have been significant enough that we believe it would be imprudent to present the standard comparison tables before the issues are resolved, as doing so could create confusion or be misleading. Our revenue and forecast tracking relies heavily on fiscal year-to-date collection comparisons between the current and prior fiscal year. Because of that methodology, these timing shifts and one-time events have a pronounced effect on the year-to-date results. I will walk through those impacts in more detail as we review Table 5. So this Table 5 on page 75 of your meeting packet provides detailed information on all unrestricted general fund revenue sources, including fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2025 actuals, as well as year-to-date actual collection comparisons for fiscal years 2025 and 2026, based on agency reports received through the end of April. I'll move through this table very quickly, highlighting only the major revenue sources and the key issues affecting the results when relevant. So I will focus mainly on the first 5 pages. I will pause after each page in case if there are questions, so we can just address them right away. Next, I will begin with the sales and use tax. The 2% sales and use tax dedicated to the general fund is listed near the top of the page, directly beneath the sales and use tax subheading. So far, the Department of Taxation has collected 8 months of revenue for fiscal year 2026. Fiscal year 2026 year-to-date collections are up 14.8% compared to the same period last fiscal year. There are 2 factors affecting the year-over-year comparison. Fiscal year 2025 year-to-date collections have been affected by the Department of Taxation's replacement of its unified tax system with Project Mint, short for Modernize Your Nevada Tax. When Phase 1 of Project Mint went live in November 2025, postings for sales and use tax and few other revenue sources occurred approximately 2 weeks earlier than historical distribution patterns. This resulted in a shortened closing period and lower fiscal year 2025 year-to-date revenue recognition, as approximately $75 million of actual November 2025 revenue was not captured in this current fiscal year 2025 year-to-date total column. The impact of this issue is limited to fiscal year 2025 year-to-date revenue tracking. The Department of Taxation made catch-up postings last summer at the close of fiscal year 2025 for the affected revenues. As a result, this timing-related distortion is going to fully resolve by the end of the summer when we compare 2 complete fiscal years. When we meet again later this year, we will present tables that will show how fiscal year 2026 actual revenues performed relative to the Economic Forum forecast. So the second factor has to do with fiscal year 2026 year-to-date collections. They are benefiting from a one-time windfall resulting from a change in the Department of Taxation's accounting period close date. Beginning with the August 2026 business period distribution, the department closed the month in the middle of the month rather than at the start of the month. According to the Department of Taxation, this change generated a one-time gain of approximately $27 million for the state share of the tax. As a result, the prior fiscal year-to-date amount is artificially low by $75 million, while the current fiscal year-to-date amount reflects the benefit of administrative timing changes totaling nearly $30 million, creating a distorted comparison between the two periods. The Department of Taxation has also begun Phase 2 of Project Mint, and to date, your staff has not observed any additional collection distortions related to the Phase 2 revenues. Next, we will move on to the gaming percentage fee, which is located few lines below the sales and use tax on this page. This tax is administered by the Gaming Control Board and is not affected by Project Mint. This tax is imposed on taxable gross gaming revenue paid by non-restricted gaming licensees. To date, we have collected 10 months of the fiscal year's revenue, with only 2 months remaining. Gaming percentage fee collections before the application of tax credits are 3.5% higher compared to the same period last fiscal year. More broadly, recent trends in the state's two largest economically sensitive revenue sources have shown some improvement. In recent months, if I can just mention that sales tax collections, as well as this gaming percentage fee revenues, have both demonstrated momentum. This may cautiously suggest that tourism-related activity in Las Vegas has improved somewhat compared to earlier in this fiscal year. Turning to another tourism-related revenue source, the live entertainment tax. It is listed further down on this page. For live entertainment provided by gaming establishments, the tax is administered by the Nevada Gaming Control Board, while live entertainment provided by non-gaming establishments is administered by the Nevada Department of Taxation. Total live entertainment tax revenue is down 2.9% compared to the same period last fiscal year, with the non-gaming portion performing better than the gaming segment. The last highlight on this page I was going to mention is the commerce tax. It is located towards the bottom of this page. Commerce tax is an annual tax levied on businesses with more than $4 million in Nevada gross revenue per fiscal year. Because the tax due date falls very close to the official close of the state fiscal year, the third Friday in September, a portion of collections is typically recorded in the following fiscal year. In fiscal 2026, the amount of prior fiscal year revenue posted was higher than expected due to technical issues the Department of Taxation experienced with certain taxpayer returns and payments, as well as the timing of a statewide cyber attack last August, which temporarily took certain state systems offline and delayed posting of revenue. After accounting for the effect of the delay, the Department of Taxation indicated that approximately $80 million in revenue was deferred from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2026. As a result, fiscal year 2026 year-to-date collections are significantly higher than those for the same period a year ago. So that completes my remarks on the first page. Before I move on to the second page, I just wanted to pause here briefly for any questions, if there are any.
Does anyone have any questions, comments? Brian? Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Ms. Powers. This is helpful. On the sales and use tax, just because I ask about it every meeting, I realize we'll get an updated report at our next meeting, but can you just give a sense? It sounds like we need to be thinking about a $75 million adjustment in fiscal 25 that was, I'll say, quote, too low or in the wrong period, underreported, however we want to think about that, because some of the system changes. And then in the current fiscal year 26, this one-time adjustment for the cutoff period for reporting added about 27 million or upwards of $30 million. So we've kind of, if I'm looking at this right, there's about $100 million swing, and we're talking about sales and use tax outperforming by a reported of about 167 million. So sales and use tax collections are still outperforming despite some of these one-time anomalies that we're experiencing, up maybe 60, 70 million, somewhere in that range. Is that a fair way to be just thinking about it as we kind of think about the go-forward plan?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for the question. For the record, Susanna Powers. Yes, that is correct. So if I were to correct sales and use tax year-to-date growth in fiscal 2026, putting that $75 million into the fiscal year 2025 year-to-date column, it would show that sales and use tax is up 7.4%, I'm sorry, fiscal 26 year-to-date, which is very much in line with taxable sales. The tally on that, fiscal 26 year-to-date through the month of through the month of February, is up 7.6%. So if the taxable sales are up 7.6%, it's very much in line that the sales and use tax is up 7.4% at this time of the year when we compare to where we would have been a year ago, if not that $75 million distortion. I did not make any changes or adjustments for the one-time event, as that money actually is in the bank. So it will be just a one-time windfall that will not get corrected. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Gordon. I do have a lot more to cover. So.
All right. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Questions from Mr. Finger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Susanna, when are commerce tax returns due? Is it generally at the end of the fiscal year? Is that why the April year-to-date numbers are so light compared to the annual collection amounts?
Mr. Finger, for the record, Susanna Powers, thank you for that question. So I don't have the exact due date in my mind. I may have to phone a friend, Mr. Nakamoto, in case if he remembers it at some point in August, I believe, but I don't have the date in my memory. Let's pause here for a second, Mr. Nakamoto.
Thank you, Michael Nakamoto with the record, or for the record. Mr. Finger, the due date in statute is 45 days after the close of the tax year. The tax year coincides with the state's fiscal year. The 45th day is August 14th, and then that can vary depending on whether August 14th falls during the week or on a weekend.
Thank you both. So I just want to make sure I process this. So roughly $80 million in that 45-day filing period was booked to fiscal year 26 instead of 2025. So by extension, 2025 collections would have been, give or take, $350 million, a normal number. And if a similarly normal number came in 2026, given the $80 million adjustment because of the deferral of that recording, the number is going to land at 420 or 430. What happens in the math of legislative action and other things when things like that happen? Anything, is it just in the wash of some revenues overperform and some revenues underperform, and you just go from year to year and make new budgetary adjustments based on what this process yields and what the lawmakers and the governor are ultimately allowed to spend?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Finger. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. That's correct. Basically, we have a number of revenues that either outperform or underperform. And then when you get to the end of the fiscal year, you hope you're close. And so in the grand scheme of things, we were short of the forecast last fiscal year, but not by a huge amount because there were other revenues that could make up for it. And the state also has a fund balance that they can rely on. They normally will close a budget with a 5% ending fund balance at least. It was higher this time because there's been a lot of money available. So in those instances where we do fall short, that's when you start working on reserves. But otherwise, your observation is correct. Because of the issues that occurred with the payment issues with the commerce tax, compounded by the cyber attack, which resulted in about $80 million of FY25 revenue being deferred into FY26. The end result is exactly what you described. We would have been very close to the forecast in FY2025. We weren't, but we had other revenues to make up for it. And then in FY2026, these are the additional revenues that can be used in essence to buffer any other revenues that happen to be not performing. So it kind of will flow into the fund balance, and it will be available if it is needed for revenue, or otherwise the legislature could appropriate it at some point during the 2027 session.
And Madam Chair and my peers and staff, I promise you I'm not going to do any more of these, but I'm going to ask one more. That first sales tax recording issue that you described to us in 2025, I believe you said happened in November. Is that accurate? The $75 million where there was an adjustment difference?
Mr. Finger, for the record, Susanna Powers, correct. So there was phase one of Mint, Project Mint, affected the cutoff, missing that $75 million, and it's only a problem as of now when we're comparing the year-to-date revenues. They made a make-up posting later before the fiscal year 25 closed, so it is just artificially lower now, just on this piece of paper. The money did come in, but just later. But for the comparison purposes, this is a little bit distorted. And then in fiscal 26, we had that one-time event resulting from an administrative change that created that one-time windfall of $27 million. Hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, forgive me, so November, and you said fiscal year 2025, so that's the calendar November 2024 that first error happened in?
Mr. Finger, thank you for the question. Susanna Powers, for the record. I wouldn't say it was necessarily an error. It was just how it was their first phase of this modernization project. So it is just when the system went live, and it just created that shortened closing period. In November 2025.
No aspersion intended. No, November 2024 is the key to my question.
Correct.
Is that the correct month?
Yes.
It's actually, Michael Nakamoto, for the record, it's actually October of 2024. So it's the October 2024 tax period where the taxes would be due at the end of November. Previously, they would have been reported closer to the end of December, but they were actually reported toward the beginning of December. So they cut it off early, and the end result was only about half of the revenue we were anticipating actually posted in early December for the October tax period.
But because this is the punchline of the entire question, because we're doing an April year-to-date to an April year-to-date, none of those numbers matter unless, like in the commerce tax example, they roll over and cause a year-end rollover. What I don't understand is if there was a month-to-month posting anomaly in absence of error, how it rolls over into a year-to-date comparison to a year-to-date comparison?
Thank you, Mr. Finger, for the question. Michael Nakamoto for the record. Normally what we do is we take year-to-date collections. And so if you want to think about the fact that the Department of Taxation would just have reported March collections. So we'd have 9 months of collections, which we have for FY 2026 because each month was reported properly in FY 2026. But if you go back to this time last year, the way we're thinking about it, because they cut off that period early, we only had 8.5 months in FY 2025 because for that October period that they reported at the beginning of December, it was only about half the month. They eventually posted.
Okay, so it got lost. Forgive my terminology, no aspersion intended. It didn't get recorded. It got recorded later in the fiscal year. So it isn't just as simple that it was October versus November, but there was actually a gap of a half month that only got rectified late in the fiscal year.
That is correct.
That's what I did.
That is correct.
Thanks
And
for
so,
staying with me. I appreciate it.
That occurred late August, early September. So when we get to the full fiscal year, we can do an apples to apples comparison of the fiscal years. But right now we would be comparing 9 months to 8.5 months. And we just didn't feel that it was appropriate to put out numbers that reflected that kind of distortion.
New guy is caught up. Thank you for your patience.
All right, any more questions from Ms. Anderson? Seeing none, let's keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Susanna Powers for the record. So moving on to the second page of this table, which is the page 76 of your meeting packet. We'll look at the modified business tax, or MBT for short. In general, the MBT is imposed on taxable wages paid by certain businesses that are required to pay unemployment insurance contributions in Nevada. The tax structure and rates vary depending on the type of business. So we have 3 different categories. Non-financial, or we often refer them also as general business MBT, before any tax credits are applied, is slightly above last fiscal year's level, with collections reflecting 2 quarters of activity. The second sector, financial institution MBT collections before tax credits are 2.8% above last fiscal year's level. And the last one, the mining industry MBT collections before tax credits are 4.9% higher than they were at this time last year. That's all I have for this page. Unless there's questions, I will move on to the third page of this table. Turning to
See any questions?
sorry.
So go for it.
Turning to page 77 of your packet, the top of the page shows total MBT collections across those 3 categories you just saw in the previous page. Combined, these collections are 1.7% higher than a year ago. The next major revenue source on this page is the insurance premium tax. It's a little bit below there. And collections from this tax have remained consistently strong. After 2 quarters of collections and before any tax credits are applied, insurance premium tax revenue is 7.7% higher than it was a year ago. A little further down on this page is the real property transfer tax, another major revenue source. It is levied on the value of real property transferred from one person to another. The rate varies by county, but the state general fund receives $1.30 for every $500 of value transferred, less a collection allowance retained by its county. Collections from this tax are trailing 4.9% below last year's level. This tax is variable by nature and is driven by real property transfer transaction volumes and prices. That wraps up for this page. I have 2 more to go, but I will pause here for a few seconds if there are any questions. Then the next page, page 78 of your meeting packet shows several license fee and fine revenue sources. I was just going to skip this page unless there's something that needs attention. These are all part of the minor revenue sources, so it's just going to focus on the majors. So I would like to move on to the next page, 78 of your meeting packet, and discuss the final major revenue source, which is the interest income, unless you have any questions. All right, so then we made it to the last page of Table 5, excluding the footnotes. Treasurer's interest. It is the final major revenue source in this table. It has benefited from higher interest rates and above average investable balances, making this a significant source of revenue to the state. After 2 quarters of collections, this revenue is down 27.1% compared to the same period last fiscal year. This likely reflects a lower yield environment in financial markets and reduced investable balances as American Rescue Plan Act, known as ARPA, funds are being spent down, among other factors. Then a little further down, applicable tax credits are listed. After adjusting for the commerce tax credit applied against the modified business tax and all other tax credit programs, total fiscal year 2026 general fund revenue is 6.9% above last fiscal year's level at the same point in time. If we were to correct for that mint issue in fiscal year 2025 year-to-date tracking, it would shave off about 2 percentage points from this year-to-date percent. We are likely to benefit this fiscal year from a lower amount of tax credits being claimed than what is reflected in the Economic Forum forecast sheets. The Economic Forum forecast $36 million in baseball stadium transferable tax credits for fiscal year 2026. However, the staff has since received information from Mr. Hill, the CEO of the Las Vegas Stadium Authority, indicating that no baseball stadium tax credits are expected to be issued and taken during fiscal year 2026. Speaking of the Economic Forum forecast, although Tables 1 through 4 were omitted, staff can still provide verbal context regarding how current collections compare to the Economic Forum forecast. Relative to the Economic Forum forecast for fiscal year 2026, and after adjusting for Project Mint timing issues, we believe that we are approximately $165 million ahead of where we would typically expect to be at this stage of the fiscal year. Almost two-thirds of that $165 million cushion, which is $107 million, represents one-time windfall revenue either from administrative changes or the timing in which the certain tax is posted in this fiscal year. This includes the $27 million gain from a change in the sales and use tax accounting close date and roughly $80 million in fiscal 2025 commerce tax revenue that was delayed into fiscal year 2026 due to last fall's cyber attack and technical issues. That concludes my comments, and if there's any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
So,
Mr. Crum?
Michael Crum for the record. So, on that verbal forecast that you just gave, you said we're 165 million ahead of our forecast, but then 107 million, excuse me, 107 million of that is the one-time items that you mentioned. Am I characterizing that correct?
Mr. Crum, for the record, Susanna Powers. Yes, so we the staff believes that we have a $165 million cushion, and 2/3, which is about $107 million, represents that one-time windfall or one-time revenue that should have not been there, but is there. So
Right.
hopefully that answers that question.
Got it.
Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-on question to Mr. Crome's question. At the moment, page 79 of the packet is showing year-to-date general fund revenues are up about $243 million on a year-to-date basis compared to the prior year. And it sounds like the verbal update of where we're tracking is about $165 million ahead. Again, confirming what Mr. Crome had just mentioned. There's a differential there of items that I'm assuming we believe are going to normalize or won't ultimately result in us being the revenues being ahead of the forecast by the end of the fiscal year. Is that how I should be thinking about that?
Mr. Gordon, Michael Nakamoto, for the record, the $265 million at the end of the table is just comparing the numbers. So what we were at the beginning or through the end of the months for each of the fiscal years. That doesn't necessarily represent what the growth in the forecast was. So once you take into account what the forecast was projected to grow, then that's where we get to the $165 million. And then we back out the $107 million as the one-time issues. So when you're actually looking at like apples to apples economic activity, we would be looking at somewhere, that's where we would be in that 65 or between 60 and 65 million above the forecast year to date.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Anderson?
Nothing for me. Thank
Actually,
you, Madam
only-
Chair.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to the next item then, which is item 10, a presentation of historical taxable sales, gaming market, and commerce tax statistics.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. This agenda item is historically where we talk about a number of tables and charts and graphs and things that members of the Economic Forum in the past have asked us to put together or that we have been doing just to provide statistics and information for all of you. We normally at this meeting would not talk about commerce tax, but we included it this time. When we met last time, we were still working through the cyber attack issues. The Department of Taxation wasn't receiving or had not received all of the returns that they were anticipating. We only had information through late October, early November. Now that we're several months past that and we've gotten more returns, we have updated those through the latest information through, I believe, close to the end of April. And so that's probably the latest and greatest. There's always a tail coming in because people pay this late. But this one, the tail happened to be a bit bigger and it was significant enough. I think it was, the numbers changed by several percent and it was enough for us to put out new statistics. And I want to thank Ms. Scott with the Department of Taxation, who is in the audience with us today, for helping us with that information. Similarly with gaming, there are a number of statistics on win, drop, hold, gross gaming revenue in the major markets. So Washoe County, Clark County, the balance of the state, and then breaking out even into the Strip. And so that is the most recent information that we have. And that is a number of tables and charts. And I will thank Ms. Newell from the Gaming Control Board for being so helpful in providing us the information so that we can put it together. And then that brings us to taxable sales. So the whole mint issue that we have previously discussed and the change in the reporting caused a break in the taxable sales series. And so for several meetings, I have walked in and we've had a number of tables and charts that we've put together on taxable sales in counties by NAICS codes, the North American Industry Classification System. They classify businesses based on their industry or occupation. And so we've always had a very good, robust series of taxable sales going back to the 90s. And then once this mint change happened, we didn't have that anymore because there was a fundamental break in the series. And so for several meetings, we've been coming in and saying, we don't have anything yet. The Department of Taxation is working on trying to get an apples to apples comparison. I am glad to report to you today that we actually have a series. It is not the series that we had before. The Department of Taxation was able to go through to the beginning of their old system, which began in January of 2007. We have taxable sales statistics by county, by industry, going back from January of 2007 to the most recent, I believe is February of 2026. So there are on the legislature's interim committee page for this meeting, which is www.leg.nv.us/app/interim committee /REL /interim 2025 /meeting /35175. I thought I'd throw it out there for anybody who's listening. We have two files that are linked there. The first is a series of charts, and they're very similar to the charts that we've had before by county, by industry, down to the 3 digits. And then we have a series of tables that do year-to-date and full fiscal year comparisons for statewide taxable sales as well as for major counties for each of the NAICS codes at the 3-digit level. I am going to actually bring up the tables real quick just to show some information. So I don't know if Ms. Anderson, you can see what I have now on the screen. It looks like it is now up. So we have 22 pages. Basically what we did is we used to have a number of files that we would put together. And so for the ease of organization, for both the charts and the tables, we combined them into separate files. The charts are 142 pages, and I'm not going to go through them. But for the taxable sales tables, I thought I would. And so this is showing information going back to FY 2022, but we do have it back going further back, like I said, to January of 2017. And so this is now a comparison by the 3-digit NAICS codes that you can see here. So you can see for a number, and I'll start with general merchandise retailers. That's 452, 454, and 455. And the reason why we combined those together was because the Census Bureau, who does all of the NAICS codes, they like making changes to them, and they do this every 5 years. So between FY 2017 and then up to now, FY 2026, there have been 2 different changes to NAICS. So back at the beginning, at that point in FY 2017, we were on the 2012 NAICS classifications. Then later in 2017, they made changes, and then they made changes again in 2022. So Ms. Owens in our office, and I appreciate all of the work that she did, tried her hardest and using what the Census Bureau puts out to map the changes and group everything together as best as possible so we could have as close to apples as we possibly could in terms of taxable sales. I don't know if it's perfect. I don't know if we could ever have it perfect, short of going through and looking at 150,000 taxpayer records to see what the individual changes were. But she did a really good job, I think, in trying to get us to the point where we can actually start putting out these tables and this information for all of you and for the members of the public. And again, this is one area where I want to thank Ms. Scott and then Director Hughes and her staff at the Department of Taxation for all of the work that they did for us to have a taxable sales series. And again, it's not the best, it's not the series that we had before, but for us to be able to go back to the beginning of 2007 and have what we believe is the best taxable sales series both looking back and going forward and having it match, we're appreciative of that, and we believe it will be useful to this body as well as to the forecasts that are presented. So, Madam Chair and members of the forum, that's all I had for this agenda item, and I would be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamoto. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification. This is great information. I think it'll be really helpful for the work that we do. Are those data and reports, is that a manual process you've done at LCB, or is that something that's also, if you know, available on the Department of Taxation's website on an adjusted sort of apples to apples format as we think about where to capture that data on a go-forward basis?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Gordon. Michael Nakamoto for the record. The Department of Taxation sent us a bunch of spreadsheets. And in fact, they sent us spreadsheets going down to the 6 digits. So we had to aggregate it up to the 3 digits. And in terms of how available this is, I am not going to be able to answer that question, and my phone a friend is in the audience, and I'm going to ask Ms. Scott from the Department of Taxation to come up and provide that answer for you.
Good morning, Erica Scott for the record with the Department of Taxation. I can definitely take this request back to our agency to see if we can do a one-time release of the historical data pulled in the same manner, but we are releasing data each month going forward since the implementation of the new system. So we just posted the March actually just the other day. So the very fresh, up-to-date data with the most recent taxable sales pulled in the same manner, but we would have to maybe work with LCB on obtaining if there's a spreadsheet that has the historical data that users can also download. So we can take that request back to our agency.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott. That's great. But going forward, it sounds like the new reporting that's coming out of the Department of Taxation is an apples to apples comparison year over year, sort of, I think, the manual adjustment that's been done, and now it's just part of the routine reporting at the Department of Taxation. That's fair?
Yes, Erica Scott for the record, that is correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Do you have any other questions, comments? Ms. Anderson?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So then we can move on to the next item, which is item 11, discussion of the report by the Economic Forum to the Interim Finance Committee required pursuant to NRS 353228.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. You may remember back in agenda item 6, I talked about the requirement for a presentation to the Interim Finance Committee following these interim meetings, the on or before December 10th, and then this meeting on or before June 10th. And that report based on the goings on of this committee is required to be made to the next appropriate meeting of the Interim Finance Committee. The next appropriate meeting is in our view, the next meeting of the Interim Finance Committee, which is scheduled for Thursday, June 18th. It is historically been the practice for either the chair to make that presentation, or if the chair is not available, for staff, translated me, to make that presentation to the Interim Finance Committee. It is staff's intention to work with our colleagues in the Fiscal Analysis Division who staff the Interim Finance Committee to make sure that this is placed on that agenda for the June 18th meeting. And I can work with the chair, or if the chair wants to let me know whether she is available or wishes to defer that responsibility to me, she can do so at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we could work on that after the meeting. Thank you. All right, and then instructions to the item number 12, instructions to the Technical Advisory Committee on Future State Revenues, NRS 353229, concerning the general fund revenue forecasts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. So the way that the Economic Forum kind of has worked since its inception is that this body will consider and approve all of the revenue forecasts for the State General Fund at those forecast meetings, which would happen now in November and in April. But they're not sitting and listening. What they will do is they will consider forecasts for what we call the major general fund revenues. And Ms. Powers, when she went through the year-to-dates, talked about 8 different revenue sources: sales and use tax, the gaming percentage fee, modified business tax, insurance premium tax, the live entertainment tax, and that's both components, gaming and non-gaming, the real property transfer tax, the commerce tax, and what was added last time, treasurer's interest income. This body will hear the forecasts from all of the forecasters, or in the instance of a few of them, there was just a consensus forecast and you only heard one. But you would hear those forecasts and make decisions based on what's presented to you. But for the other 90 or so that are on the Economic Forum sheets, you dedicated or assigned those to the Technical Advisory Committee. So this is the agenda item where you give us instructions and by extension the Technical Advisory Committee as to which of the revenues that you want to keep as a major revenue, which you would like to have as a non-major revenue. That is, do you want to add to any of the 8, take any of the ones that we mentioned off? That is the decision that is in front of you at this point.
Let me check if there's any questions. I know Mr. Crum has a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with how we've done it in the past, but are there any recommendations for categories that need to move either in or out from staff?
Thank you, Mr. Crum, for the question. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. The only one that I think, I mean, we use major and non-major kind of as a loose definition. It's not necessarily about the revenue that's generated, although for some of these, obviously it is. Sales, gaming, modified business tax, insurance premium tax generate hundreds of millions, or in the case of sales tax, $1.8 billion. Those are significant sources of revenue. But when you get to, for example, the real property transfer tax, there are a few revenue sources that generate more than the RPTT does, but it's been historically the preference of this body to leave it in as a major, because the health, that tax is tied pretty much to the health of the real estate market and industry. And because that is such a big driver of other things, that was the decision to leave that in. I don't know if I have any recommendations or preferences per se. The only thing that I would note is the interest income was one that was added last time because it was so significant. But as Ms. Powers noted, with interest rates perhaps not falling as much as we thought, but the investable balance in terms of the money that the state treasurer's office is able to invest going down, we're seeing those collections going down. That could be one that you could consider moving back to a non-major. But again, this is your discretion and it's not my decision. We do what you tell us that you want us to do.
Hi, it's Michael Crum for the record, only because I think I made the recommendation to move the interest income piece up. I think I'd like to keep it with our discretion at this point, maybe for another go around. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mr. Crum. I think it's an interesting and it's volatile enough, or has been volatile historically, that it's kind of an interesting data point for us and does move the needle a little bit. But I'll defer to others have comments.
I'm supportive of that, but I'd appreciate the favor of you listing those revenues back again that were included in that list last time.
Thank you, Mr. Finger. Michael Nakamoto for the record. So they are, and this is not in any particular order other than I wrote them down, and so I wouldn't forget them. So the sales and use tax, which is the state 2% rate, the gaming percentage fee, the modified business tax, and this is all three components of the modified business tax: non-financial, financial, and mining, the insurance premium tax, the live entertainment tax, and that's both components, the non-gaming portion administered by the Department of Taxation, the gaming portion administered by the Gaming Control Board, the real property transfer tax, the commerce tax, and treasurer's interest income. The other thing that I would note, with your indulgence, Madam Chair, is that the taxes where there was a consensus forecast that was presented were the financial institution and mining component of the modified business tax, the commerce tax, and treasurer's interest income. Those are the portions or forecasts where you only received one consensus forecast agreed to by the agency, the Fiscal Analysis Division, and the Budget Division. All of the rest of the forecasts of those, you received individual forecasts from the individual forecasters who would be presenting them, agency fiscal budget, and then Moody's Analytics, and we'll talk about them in a future agenda item.
I guess what's the appetite of because this one sounds like we need a motion. Do we want to keep the same accounts under TAC, or do we want to look at a different, moving anything in or out?
It's Michael Crone for the record. So off the top of your head, what then would be the largest item that would be with TAC at this point if we keep it the same way? And what's the amount? Just trying to get a sense for what we're deferring.
Mr. Crome, Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Off the top of my head and scrolling through very quickly, I believe unclaimed property, if we're going by FY 2025 actuals, would have been the largest one. That is one where there were a number of one-time and other issues that caused an accelerated amount of unclaimed property. And based on my conversations with the Treasurer's Office, I don't believe that those are anticipated to repeat. That was approximately $135.6 million in FY 2025. Wherein normally it's around $60 to $70 million. If we're talking about on a regular basis, it would probably be the cigarette tax, which is over $100 million. But that is one historically was a major revenue at one point, but was moved to a non-major revenue probably within the last 7 or 8 years or so, because of the lack of productivity in that tax as fewer people are smoking.
Perfect. Thank you. I can make a motion if anybody's got anything else. Okay. I make a motion that we maintain the categories as they were previously.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Please vote. All in favor?
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that moves us on to item 13, discussion and recommendations regarding the Economic Forum's use of Moody's Analytics as a private forecast service.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Item 13 is actually a perfect segue from item 12. So now that we've established the list of major revenues, as I had previously noted, for the forecasts where we won't be presenting a consensus, what has historically happened is you will receive separate forecasts from the agency responsible for collecting or administering the tax, whether it's the Department of Taxation, Gaming Control Board, or otherwise, the Fiscal Analysis Division, myself, or a member of my staff, or from the Budget Office, so Dr. Solorio, or somebody from that office. But there are also forecasts that are received for the sales and use tax and the gaming percentage fee from an outside reviewer. And that outside forecaster has for the last about 15 years or so been Moody's Analytics. So previously Mr. White and then now Ms. Emily Mandel will either appear via Zoom or actually come to Carson City, and as part of their presentation or her presentation will give their outlook on the national and state economy, and they will also present their forecasts for the sales and use tax and the gaming percentage fee. This is the agenda item where you wish to, where you can let us know whether you wish to consider using Moody's as that outside forecaster, or whether you wish to choose somebody else to do that. There are a couple of things that I will mention as part of this. It obviously is at your discretion what to do. The Department of Taxation, the Governor's Finance Office, and the Fiscal Analysis Division already enter into a contract with Moody's Analytics to provide us data. And so we use that for a number of purposes. The state demographer uses it for his work. We use it for our forecast work as well as for our analysis during legislative sessions. Governor's Finance Office does the same. They use it for their analysis and their forecasts. That contract right now is in process, and when we have added this portion to it or made this decision, basically we amend that contract and put those the services for them to come present to this body and provide forecasts in. So if that would be your decision, we would work with Moody's Analytics to add that portion of the contract. Or if there is another firm that would be preferable, we can reach out to that firm and work with them. And those are the comments that I have, and I am sure there are questions, and I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Sure. Does anyone have comments, questions? Ms. Anderson? Any questions? I mean, I guess, this comes up every couple of years, and I'm not really sure who else does this specific work for states. It's a little bit of a challenge. It's a bit different than my day job, so I don't know who else exactly you'd hire to do this. And my sense is the state's pretty happy with Moody's as far as their performance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. In terms of the services we already do receive from them, yes, we are. They have a good library of data and information that we use and we need, and they are very responsive to our questions or concerns when we look at data and it doesn't make sense, because I think we can all agree that sometimes data doesn't make sense. From that aspect, we don't have any concerns. In terms of their forecasts, I think that's up on the information that they present to you. That's up for all of you to determine whether you find it useful or beneficial. And then in terms of other firms, I'm aware of a couple of others at the national level, such as Global Insight, which is now part of Standard & Poor's. They had the contract before Moody's, so that's going back to about 2009 or 10 when we were last with Global Insight. They're out there. There are a couple of others. There are also more regional firms that could potentially be looked at. Can't think of any off the top of my head. The only thing that I would note is typically we've tended to look at out of state for the outside forecasters to actually have kind of an outside perspective of somebody who's looking at Nevada rather than going with local Nevada firms, because I can name a number of qualified firms in Nevada who could do the same thing, either in the private sector or looking like, for example, at the universities who have the capacity to do it. It has typically been the decision to go out of state, though. But again, this is your decision to make.
I think I agree that we sort of need the out of state firm just because everybody's sort of interrelated. And I think it's always a challenge even without a state is sometimes they don't have as good of data as like our gaming guys here because they have such strong relationships with the different, like I'm always fascinated with like the live entertainment tax projections because these guys tend to know even more than what's generally known to the public. And so I think those relationships, but I think I'm pretty comfortable with Moody's, but I think we'll open it up to others.
One question, you said the state uses Moody's. How often do you actually look to bid that work for pricing, just to maintain a competitive process with that? And are we required at some point to look at that?
Thank you, Mr. Crome, for the question. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Because we operate on a biennial budget, we are looking at quoting them every 2 years. We coincide that with the Economic Forum cycle rather than the state's biennial budget because of this part of it, which kind of gets added on. We are right now we've gotten the quote from Moody's for our portion for our data services. The contract is being worked on, and once it is finalized, it would become effective on July 1st. If it is your decision to continue using Moody's, we would reach out to them again and then get pricing for that portion of it. But this is also something that we build into our budgets for the Governor's Finance Office and the Fiscal Analysis Division as our duties and our obligations as staff to the Economic Forum.
All right, thank you.
Do we have a motion? Any more questions?
I'll make a motion that we stay with Moody's for the next cycle.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to stay with Moody's. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. We'll stick with Moody's. Thank you. And that brings us to item 14, presentation on actions approved by the legislature during the 83rd session regarding the Economic Forum and scheduling of future events.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Nakamoto with Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. Normally, the last agenda item before public comment for this meeting would be scheduling of future meetings, because this is the point where you would dictate when the next meetings would be and in terms of the forum process. But with the law changes that occurred in the 2025 session, that is going to possibly require, or it will require changes and in terms of when the meetings occur, and then as well as possibly how many meetings occur to get your duties done. So as I noted during my presentation on the overview of the Economic Forum, there is no requirement in terms of the number of times the Economic Forum is required to meet. They're only required to release their forecasts in the late fall and then in the spring during the legislative session. It is up to the forum to decide how many meetings they want to have to get to that point, and then by extension, how many times the Technical Advisory Committee would be then required to meet. So for just about as long as I have been part of staff to this body, which is going back to 2005, we had that meeting in the spring on or before May 1st. And there was always a decision to just have that meeting as close to May 1st as possible. One meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee before that. Basically, we came in, presented forecasts, gave updated information, decisions were made, and we're done. So Senate Bill 419 of the 2025 session, as I had previously noted, changed that date from May 1st to April 1st. And it's specifically Section 2, subsection 1, paragraph E of that bill on page 87 in the packet, changed the date from May 1st to April 1st. As your staff contemplates that we figure is a fairly easy decision. Rather than having a technical advisory committee in mid to late April and that meeting on or before May 1st, we have a technical advisory committee meeting in mid to late March in advance of that meeting on April 1st. The other change, though, in Assembly Bill 356 of the 2025 session is where this body is going to have to make some decisions. So historically, there have been 3 meetings of the Economic Forum in that fall cycle. The first one would be to receive information. We would provide actual revenues for the previous fiscal year compared to the forecast. You'd get presentations from Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Wright, the state demographer, a bunch of other people in relevant industries, whether it's real estate, gaming, tourism. We've had Mr. Hill come in and give that presentation a number of times, and anything that's relevant, health insurance, the Silver State Exchange, and the marketplace, whatever was of interest to the chair and to this body, and we would do that at the October meeting. Then in the November meeting, we would come in, have Moody's give their presentation, and you would hear forecasts from the presenter or from all of the forecasters on the major revenues, and then there would be a non-major preliminary forecast potentially that was submitted as well. And then you would turn around, and that second meeting usually happened in November, right around or just after Election Day, and then you would turn around and have that third meeting on or before December 3rd, where you would hear forecasts again, both the majors and the non-majors, make your decisions. We would put that report out. So with the change from December 3rd to November 15th, we know we would be having that last meeting on or before November 15th, and there would be a technical advisory committee meeting before that. The question, though, remains, or what the decision in front of all of you is, whether you want to have 2 meetings still leading up to that, in which case we would probably have to have that first meeting probably in mid-September, and that's where you got the information and the presentations. Then the second meeting in October would be, if we did it the old way, would be you would get forecasts of the major revenues, possibly the non-major revenues, and that's probably where we would have to do the actuals compared to the forecasts because of the close date of the fiscal year being in the 3rd week of September. That would give us enough time to put together the information for that. And then that September meeting is then where all the presentations would occur. That's the way it's always been done, but that doesn't have to be the way that it's done. You could still have 3 meetings, but you could only decide to hear major revenues at that second meeting in mid-October and just tell the technical advisory committee, you can give us a forecast only at that November meeting, or you could just go down to 2 meetings and have forecasts at 1 and do presentations at an October meeting. That is your decision. And again, as your staff, we have no preference because we are prepared to do whatever is asked of this body. So that's really the decision that is in front of you of how many meetings you would want to have during this cycle, and then probably when they would be. I will answer any questions otherwise. Thank you.
Okay. And if the new date change, this stuff definitely makes it more of a compressed schedule, which we know is a lot harder on staff. And so that's kind of weighing on my mind a little bit. I don't know, do you guys?
And Madam Chair, if I could add, and I neglected to put a little bit of context behind those 2 pieces of legislation. Senate Bill 419, the date change from May 1st to April 1st, was done largely to give the legislature enough time to close the budget, because May 1st to the end of session, the first Monday in June, it's not a lot of time. It's depending on when that date falls, and I think in 2027, the first Monday in June is actually the 5th Monday in May. So I believe the last day of session, if my math is correct, is May 31st. So they would have had 30 days, and now they're going to have 60 to do that. With AB 356, which changed the date from from December 3rd to November 15th, that really didn't have so much to do with the Economic Forum as it did other parts of the process, and specifically relating to collective bargaining. So under the old law, the basically collective bargaining waited for the Economic Forum, and then the collective bargaining negotiations would occur. And by the time those were done, it was often too late to get them included in the executive budget. So the legislature, in order to make collective bargaining work, had to make adjustments during the legislative session. By moving this date 18 days, it allows collective bargaining to start sooner, gives the governor's office more time to build that into the budget. So that's, and I apologize, Madam Chair, for not giving that context, but that's the reason why that was done. And again, I will let you get back to your deliberations. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, the one challenge obviously is by moving it up, we missed some of the data from November. We don't have necessarily all the October data, if I remember right, because historically everybody's still compiling at the end of the month, but we'll survive with that.
And to that point, Madam Chair, Michael Nakamoto for the record, depending on the timing of Thanksgiving, oftentimes we weren't able to get that most recent month into our forecasts anyway. So the only thing that this is doing is just ensuring that we'll have all of the information through October, but under the old system, that may have been the best we had. So there may be some instances, depending on the timing in the calendar, where we would be losing an extra month, but a lot of the times we wouldn't have. I don't know if the information would be any better for the November 15th versus December 3rd.
I'll accept that. Thank you. I don't know. What are you guys thinking? Do we want to stick with the 3 meetings or 2 for November or for the early?
I have to rely on the 3 of you that have done this work to give me advice on whether 3 meetings or 2 meetings is the right path.
I mean, certainly it's a rigorous, if you consolidate it down to the informational and then the forecasting, it's a long day. The informational day is very long, and potentially the forecasting day, but that's what we're here for. But I don't know. Should we stick to how we've been doing it? I want to make sure everybody gets to weigh in here.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay, so I would just offer that, given that 2 of the 5 of us are new, and I agree, I defer to you that have experienced this before, but I'd prefer not to, I guess, be rushed in our first time getting through this information. And so if it's all the same to you, my preference would be 3. But again, I defer to those that have been through this before.
Yeah, Michael Crum, for the record, I was actually going to say, I think maintain the 3.
All right.
Strong opinion, but yeah, I think I'd maintain the 3 just so we can get through the material.
If that was a motion, I will second.
It was not a motion, but I will either make the motion. I will make the motion that we maintain 3 meetings.
Your second.
Second.
All right. There's a motion on the floor. Please vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So with that motion having been made, seconded, and approved, we will be reaching out to you, it sounds like sometime in that mid-September range, to have the first forecast. And again, that's going to be exclusively presentations. I think then if it's my understanding of the decision that you made, you wish to kind of keep doing what we're doing with only the changes to the date. So then the mid-October meeting would be presentation from Moody's. That's probably when we're going to have to do the actuals compared to the forecast. Normally we would have done that at that first meeting, but with the timing, we'd be moving that to the second. And then you would be getting major and non-major revenue forecasts presented to you. So the technical advisory committee would be meeting before that October meeting and then again before the November meeting. If that is my understanding, if my assumption is incorrect, I would appreciate some clarification. Thank you.
No, that's, I think, where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. And that brings us, I think, to public comment. Is there anyone in Carson City who wishes to comment?
Madam Chair, there's nobody here.
All right. In Las Vegas, is there anyone who has a public comment? Does not appear anyone wants to comment. Is there anyone on the phone that wishes to comment?
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
And then I assume we've gotten no written comment, so we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much to staff and everyone who put everything together and got all the documents for us. We appreciate everybody's help on this. Excited to have 2 new members.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to these 3 meetings and making an effort to all be there in person together, so I won't be the lone ranger up here in Carson City, although I do look forward to having you up here when we get closer to the legislative session. But thank you for accommodating me in Carson today.
Oh, thank you for being there. Go ahead and adjourn for good. Thank you.